Live from Facebook, it's the Plutopia News Network, featuring the not ready for cable news players tonight. Of course, Suzy, Shelor, some guy named Scoop Sweeney, and of course, the immaculate John Lebkowsky. Our guest, Jake Dunagan, will be here to talk about weirdness and such. Tell us, Jake, what is weird about governance? I always pictured that as being like Leslie in a business suit. Elucidate.
I would take that. I wish we could describe government as weird. It's that would be the best description, I think. A little bit strange, a little bit forward-looking, which I'll talk about later. But I'm afraid our governments now are just failures and death cults rather than weird. So I'm here to advocate for weirdness in its old meaning, which means looking for portents of things to come. And I'm hoping government gets weirder in that sense.
So does this mean that you have something against death cults?
Well, yeah, I think they're death cults think about the future, which is that should be a check mark, but I just disagree with their end dates. They usually have an end to their. I like thinking about the future with a little more open-endedness than a single future that ends with with the end.
What are you talking about?
So I already know the answer to this because I've read this piece that you've written for the Chronicle, this op-ed. But please tell us, what does being weird have to do with the future?
Yeah, so I've already I kind of let the punchline out at the beginning, but the word weird, I mean, it sort of becomes synonymous with Austin and keep it weird and all that, which is great. It's my favorite, even though I'm a homer living here, it's my favorite city motto or credo. But the origins of weird, the weird sisters and weird winds of things to come really means, to look ahead, to be able to read signs and signals of what's coming and understand those and make sense out of those. So if we're going to embrace the weird moniker and identity, then I think we should go back to that meaning and think about ourselves in this city as the most future oriented, the most ready for dealing with things to come and institutionalizing that. So doing that in government, doing it in business, doing it in culture. And so that was sort of what I was advocating for, is the three weird sisters. So a concerted future effort in government called the Office of the Weird, a concerted effort in the business community called the Chamber of the Weird, sort of like a Chamber of Commerce, but Chamber for the Weird, and then the Club of Weird, which would be kind of our Wild West cultural attempt to install futures thinking and as a sort of cultural norm within the city. So that's the nugget of it, but yeah, I mean, the whole idea is really to install and institutionalize long-term thinking in the city so that we so that we can deal with things and make a better future for ourselves.
So do you really think Austin is that future focused?
I don't know. It's mixed, right? I mean, I think it thinks about the world in a different way. I mean, I do think it's future focused. I don't think it's purely growth focused, although that sort of is the dominant mode these days. I think people in Austin have, in general, and everything I'm going to say probably about Austin is overgeneralization, but I'll do my best and we can talk about those subtleties. But I think there's, kind of a visionary community here, a nonconformist community, a way of seeing alternatives and creating possibilities rather than just sort of surfing probabilities, which I think other cities that are known for being future-oriented do. So I think Austin is a future creator and inventor. And, in that sense, I think we do have a right to already consider ourselves future-oriented, but I think we should get even better at it and more focused on it.
Well, a lot of the
I guess that's
businesses that were synonymous with the weird Austin vibe, a lot of them have gone away permanently, and there may be a lot more. How do people in Austin, how does Austin government deal with this? How do they save the businesses that made Austin weird?
Yeah, I mean, that's that whole idea is sort of where I got thinking about the Chamber of the Weird, which is the last pillar or the last sister that I thought about, because, I mean, businesses are I don't know, they're thinking about the future. They're thinking about their own sustainability in the sense of being a viable business. But knowing, even, I mean, to keep Austin weird was really a business motto, right? I mean, it was trying to be local and keep out the chain stores. So I think that has already sort of been installed in that local first. Let's keep what makes Austin Austin and not become like any place. I will say, though, as a sort of different lateral aside, that keeping the past is not necessarily what, maybe that's not the best path. I don't know. Maybe things would sort of cycle through in their own time, and there is a time to move on. But I think we do all feel like there's an unjust end to some of our favorite places, and places that, had we done things or certain decisions been made differently, or certain forces been able to be navigated differently, that we could keep what we want and embrace the new at the same time. So weirdness is not just a fetishization of the new. It's also not a let's hold on to some version of the ideal past. I think it's really about surfing those winds of change in an elegant way and getting the kinds of futures we want out. I mean, I think Austin would be better with thread gills. But
yes.
Things come and go, and of course, this pandemic blindsided a lot of people, and so this is it's kind of a natural, unnatural event. Maybe if we had a better plan in place earlier, some contingency plans, maybe some of these places could hold on. I mean, I do think it's tragic that we're losing some of these places because of the pandemic, not through any fault of their own, or through any quote unquote natural processes, but something that we're not really dealing with very well. I mean, Austin's doing okay, but other places that we live in, not so well.
So people have talked.
In Austin, there has been a sort of ongoing, I don't know, a kind of sadness about the evaporating past. I mean, as a good Buddhist, I know that change is pretty constant and things are just going to change, and I thought it was kind of funny. I was in Vancouver, and there was a guy there that we were talking to. He was saying how great Vancouver used to be before all the money came in and all the buildings went up and all that. And it's like, sounded just like Austin. And I heard that in San Francisco, and I've heard that in so many cities that I've been through, even in New York. People talk about how it used to be. But things are inherently going to change. But I think there's a question about what is the thing that should be carried forward. And to me, it seems like there's a vibe in Austin, and there's a sense of permission in Austin, to sort of like be uniquely creative. And if we could carry that forward, regardless of what else is going on, if we could just kind of figure out a way to keep that perspective alive, I think that that's what's always been in danger of making Austin a great city. I mean, Derek Woodgate and I used to debate about whether Austin could be a great city or not. And he thought no, and I thought, wow, no, the potential's here, But I think that potential is in something that people feel when they're here, and not necessarily in something that it's easy to describe or that you can intellectualize.
Right.
One of the things I've heard referenced is business Darwinism, because kind of a survival of the fittest mentality that's crept in, thanks to COVID-19, that only the strong will survive. And of course, we've seen how that's developed in some cases where all these huge companies that were suffering are getting, government bailouts, and, mom and pop are kind of left on the curb. And, so that's one of the things that's going to seriously change Austin, not just Austin, but, the entire country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe we could shift the narrative. And, when the asteroid hit, dinosaurs left, it was the strong that died. and the little the little burrowing mammals are the ones that survived and became us. So maybe with this sort of pandemic asteroid that we just got hit with, maybe eventually those big behemoths will fall off, and something weird and small that we don't think much about now will grow in the cracks and become dominant later. I mean, I think, yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
I think on the point of what do we retain? I mean, that's one of the questions I would love to be front and center of any sort of weird movement. Is not just let's hold on or let's move forward, but what do we want to keep and what do we want that's new? And one of the lines that my friend and colleague Stuart Candy says a lot, and I've taken it to heart too, is, well, it's from Ken Kesey or someone in that circle, and they said, you know, whose movie is this? And I think what Austin has done over the years is kept it's the Austin movie. Even if other businesses come in or, you know, people move from New York or California or whatever, I feel like it's done a pretty good job for whatever reason of you become part of the Austin story or the Austin movie rather than you changing the city. And I don't know if that's something that can last forever, but I mean, I've been here 7 years, so relative newbie, but I felt like, I mean, I came here for the Austin movie. You know, I came here for that vibe of freedom, nonconformity, weirdness, wonder, humans first of other things, having good conversations, all those things. And I feel like it's maintained that, at least in my time. And, you know, I don't know if this broadside that we're getting now will change that, but if there's something I would want as part of a weird futures movement is to keep figuring out what our movie is and keep running that forward and playing it out.
You know, do you think too much emphasis has been given to development in Austin in recent times? It seemed like that's where, you know, the big changes have been, you know, one office tower after another. And I'd experienced that same thing with Houston back in the 80s, where they ended up with a vast conglomerate of empty office towers. When, you know, the economy went to crap, they had all these offices and no one to rent them. And, you know, that devastated Houston for a long time. And I just hope that doesn't end up being the fate of, you know, the developments in downtown Austin.
I don't see how we could escape it. I think we're going to lose a lot. We're going to lose a lot. It's for me, it's scary because it's already not the town that it was. And I like the idea of bringing it back, but like Jake said, we can't keep everything. We have to shed some of it, but man, there's some real history that we're losing, real good music history. And it's just sad to see it go. I wish we could memorialize it somehow.
Well, there is a question of resilience there. And also a question of, like, I mean, we see things that are declaring that they're going away, but I've seen that happen before. You know, it's like the band that breaks up and they're back for a reunion 2 years later, kind of thing.
Right.
It could be that
Right.
some of the things that appear to be disappearing really aren't going to disappear, that they're just they're sort of filling up the tent right now because it feels impossibly difficult to continue, you know, because maybe they're like hand to mouth or whatever.
Yeah.
But they may find a way to bring their essence back to the, you know, back to the front to the back. Anyway.
But it may be that there are a lot of businesses that don't
revive.
There are a lot of businesses that don't deserve to survive. And so there is a bit of Darwinism going on there. And, you know, it's, you know,
I just wish it was hitting the big ones.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah. It's not about, you know, fitness or any of that. It's like, what kind of systems are we creating to make certain things adaptable and others not, right? So, I mean, we can't like prop up old things. We don't want this to be a city as a museum, you know, that doesn't have life and it's just sort of, let's hold it all in place, that kind of thing. But could we put some incentive structures in it that makes it, I don't know, that if you are doing something valuable, even in sort of an intangible way, that we could not stack the deck, but we could just create a system that rewards the things that we want to see, the outcomes. And there's a lot of room for play and there's competition and all that, but right now it just seems like we're rewarding the big behemoths that can come in, throw down, buy out, and take over, and kind of not have that heart and soul that I think we all want. So, if you have a soul, then maybe we cut you some breaks. If you're soulless, then it's gonna be harder.
Are you working with the city of Austin on this at all? Are you talking to the mayor?
Not like this proposal about all. I mean, I talk about it just as a sort of thing that I'd love to see. I have worked with the mayor's office over the years from time to time. It's mostly in futures thinking and futures training for the U.S. Conference of Mayors, which Mayor Adler is a big part of, and so little bits and pieces here. The Austin Civic Innovation Office, I've been working with them, but I would say that sort of down on the ground with teeth about what kind of zoning we're going to do and all that, not yet. And I would like to, not that that's my expertise or that I would really want to work my whole life in that, but I think articulating that or piecing it together with a longer term vision and putting those pieces in place so we can have a conversation, an imaginative conversation, and then begin to think about how to operationalize some of those things. Because right now, there's a balance between chaos and like no planning and total planning, right? And I think Houston was no planning, just throw up whatever and see what happens. And I think that was a problem. You can be over planned as well. But I think just creating a funnel, creating a system where we have good futures conversation, and then having some kind of funnel that goes back to the places that where action can take place is sort of how I see it being, or where I think some leverage points and some positive outcomes can come.
Do you want it to be part of
this? How do you think you put this together?
I don't know. I mean, I've talked here and there. I mean, I think it's got to be some sort of momentum of ideas, I think, right? So that, this is a good idea. I like that story, right? The narrative pull of the future of this. I also think that the shocks that we're going through in the last few months can accelerate a lot of the things, and it's accelerated me from this sort of, so wouldn't this be nice kind of thing that I talk about at, at bars and stuff to something that I think we need to install to survive. I mean, if you want to put it bluntly, right? We're going to need an early warning system to deal with the next thing, right? So climate change is not going away, income inequality and all of those issues. I mean, we have an election this fall that we could see political violence right around the corner or worse on the streets. Mm-hmm. So disinformation, hacking our computer systems, all of our systems are vulnerable, not just our health system, even though that one has shown to be crumbling around us. And governance maybe is the broad term to cover all those things. So, the force of a good idea, I hope, and it gains some traction. And then I would love to see it, how do you install it in the city? I'm not exactly sure how you would create an office of the weird.
Have you thought about like a methodology for framing this?
Well, I mean, the method of futures, I think would be at the heart of it. So, doing alternative futures, installing strategic foresight processes into all of the mix, doing scenarios, doing visioning, collective visioning.
Speculative design.
Yes, of course, creating artifacts from the future, creating experiences of possible futures. Another, I'll just sort of leap into this another grand idea that who knows if they'll ever come together, but it's the idea of a simulation core. So that we would, one version of this, I'll just give you the big grandiose version, is that we install the draft conscription again in our society. And instead of joining the military, you join a core of people that play test alternative futures and different policies and get ready. So they do simulations of, say, pandemics or, an environmental collapse or an economic policy that's installed. And you basically try to live it or try to play it before you live it. Because we're blindsided all the time by these things. And I think if we can simulate it and get some understanding, then maybe we're not just throwing policies out there and seeing what happens. And paying for that by, when you do that, short-term thinking is very costly and very painful often. So trying to get a little bit ahead of that. And so something like a process of doing simulations and learning from the future, rather than just guessing and then trying to course correct later, maybe if you're lucky, is to create a kind of civilizational wide future-oriented playtest and learning process. Now, for the city of Austin, that we would have to be more modest, but maybe we could do something, around that. We could come up with ideas, run simulations, run scenarios through, and then take that learning and put it back into decision-making process.
One of the things that it would seem the city is going to really need to start looking at is what to do with all the empty businesses, the businesses that are not going to be coming back. They've already closed. The places are empty, and something has to replace those. Otherwise, you look like a ghost town. And if someone isn't out there trying to figure out how to create or lure new, good businesses that will survive, into those spaces, then it's just going to be a ghost town out there when this thing starts to open up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then how is it going to open up? I mean, could we retrofit or pre-fit these empty spaces with things to come, right? So, is it flood proof? Is it pandemic ready? Right? I mean, if you have open spaces, you can. I think Jane Jacobs said something like "New ideas need old buildings." But can we try out stuff? Can all these old buildings be a place of experimentation, or problem solving, or something? And the city, I don't know, subsidizes that in some way or encourages that, or we just do it as a guerrilla, initiative where we take over.
Be a perfect place to do some co-working locations, because there are going to be a lot of people that no longer have a job, but they have the skills and they need a place to use those skills. That might be a good use for a lot of that empty space is co-working.
I was going to ask about the idea of doing this as a sort of guerrilla operation. I know it's notoriously hard to get this city government, the city council and the mayor and everybody lined up behind something like this. And politics often has a detrimental effect to the correct framing of the problem and the pursuit of solutions. So how would a guerrilla operation work, I wonder?
Yeah, I mean, I have ideas. Operation for doing weirdness.
Yeah.
Future stuff. Yeah, I mean, one of the things I did this talk a couple of years ago at TEDx UT Austin, and basically I did it as an artifact from the future/past, where I posited that Austin has had this thing called the Club of Weird since the 1850s. And people get together at Barton Springs. They take some sort of brain-altering chemical, and then they collectively imagine the future, and then go out and do it, on their own private world. So something like that, like gathering around future visions.
Yeah.
And in the op-ed I wrote, it was like, okay, we all go to the James Turrell Sky Space. Not all of us, because you only fit like 10 people in there. But so say you go in there. Everybody is tasked with going in there, spending an hour thinking about the future, writing down or putting down or remembering what they thought about there, and then coming together. Barton Springs, we get together and we share our visions for the future. And then what? Okay, well, maybe we take those visions and they're consolidated in some way and then sent as a missive to the city to say, here's May 2020's vision of the future. From 100 citizens or 1,000 citizens or whatever it ends up being. So we having a city stamp of approval for this is great, but we don't need it. I think to do future thinking and scenario visioning and artifacts from the future and experiences from the future, we just need to do it together. But I really, that there's a need, and I think we see this sort of existential threat, but I also just think it's empowering and it's exciting, and I think it creates spaces of possibility that maybe hadn't existed before.
Maybe it's a matter of building a movement.
I think so. That's a little too much for me to say, but maybe, something like that. We just do it, right? We just do it because we want to do it. And then if something comes out of it, that would be...
John, do you remember the vision quest that Whole Foods used to go on? It sounds
I
an
remember
awful lot
we did
like
something
that.
like that when we were starting Whole People.
They used to go on these vision quests with Eve and, you know, the gang, and they would eat mushrooms or drop whatever and camp out in the wilderness for like a week. And it was it got bigger and bigger, but it was always people always came back with stories. But I think that's a really great idea to, I mean, and obviously they did very well. They came up with some great ideas, except for that Whole People one. But the rest of
that wasn't such a bad idea. Sorry,
What-
old news. We don't need to talk about that.
But yeah, I wish we could somehow figure out how to move forward. I'm afraid that it's going to be very difficult because of all these empty buildings, and I don't know what's going to come back and when it's going to come back. So if you were going to build a movement, I guess you would grassroots, obviously, but on the internet, is that where you start, since nobody's able to socialize at all? Like a Facebook page?
You know, I think the trick here in this kind of movement building, and it wouldn't just be Austin. I mean, we've kind of been talking about Austin because that's like where Jake was focused with the editorial we were talking about. But this is maybe something that needs to be happening all over the country. And I know, Jake, you guys formed the Governance Futures Lab at Institute for the Future. And I remember talking to you once about that, and you were talking about how you were just encouraging people anywhere and everywhere to pick up the ideas from the Governance Futures Lab and kind of have an event or have a gathering. And I remember doing one in New York with some people, and then you and I did some things here with our Future Salon. If you could come up with some kind of basics, you know, like a cookbook for this kind of work and proliferate that, and then figure out how to network it, you know, because it's one thing for a bunch of people to go off and do these things, but it's sort of like events. You go to an event and you're really excited during the event, and you're thinking a lot of great thoughts and all the things that you're going to do when you get back and so forth. And then you get back and you sort of like lose the energy and the momentum from the event. So the real question here is how you can build a network that does have a sustained momentum.
Yeah,
That's very hard.
It is, and so hard that I think it paralyzes people, which is why I think I bristle at the idea of a movement. You know, it's too much to ask, even though maybe that's what comes out of it, but it comes out of some other, like, that's the exhaust of something that people just enjoy doing. And, you know, it's kind of where that kind of thinking was baked into the Three Weird Sisters ideas, that there would be something that's government institutional, sort of public, you know, that kind of holds that gravitas. There's a very strategic oriented Chamber of the Weird, which is business oriented, about strategic advantages and, you know, really about competitive kind of things. And then the Club of Weird is really, it's sort of wild and woolly, and whatever it becomes. But I wouldn't want it to be too instrumental, that part of it. Like, I think it's conversations, it's visions, it's creativity, it's music, it's art, you know, it's speeches, it's performance, it's embodiment. You know, I mean, Leslie biking around says something about, it's a political statement too, without, you know, being a statement, quote unquote. So just like making Austin embody that, and at a cultural level, I think was what I was hoping to see there. I think if that happens, then other things come out of it. But if you imbue too much of it with, you know, we have to do something with it too soon, I think it can carry too much weight and not get off the ground.
You know,
I don't know. I mean, if they've been able to do what they've done so far with QAnon, I would think that you could definitely do something with this.
I'm not saying nothing would come out of it. I'm just saying don't burden it with too much of instrumental goals at the beginning.
Expectation. You know, I was just reading this book by Joko Beck called Everyday Zen, and she was talking about the difference between expectation and aspiration. Mm-hmm. And expectations kind of set you up to be unhappy and to fail. But aspiration is similar, but it's, you know, it doesn't really set you up the same way. It's like, this is what I aspire to, but it's not necessarily what I expect, you know?
There's hope.
The whole thing of the movement that you want to get going, a bunch of people have already done that. That grassroots movement that we've seen in front of the state capitol, not just in Texas, capitals all over the place. They apparently emptied the Walmarts and gun stores and got the, just say no to the mask movement going. And, you have to be careful when you're making a movement that it doesn't end up going off the rails like some of those.
Yeah, that's what do they call that? The imperative, cognitive, where you have to, you don't make the rules just for everyone else. You have to make them for yourself too. And when you do something, is it morally right? That because your intention or because of the outcome, right? So that's where the movement is. It started with, it's going to start with very good intentions, right? So I think that's a good thing. Where it goes, you don't know, especially when you got crazy people with guns running around.
Yeah, and uncrazy people with guns too sometimes. I mean, that's the future space hopefully is open enough where we could all find those people. I mean, this is what I'm talking about is not necessarily, I have my own visions and desires for the future, but I think coalescing around better futures, I think there's a lot more shared common better futures that we might overlap with people like that than we think. And I think if we have a place where the future allows us a safe place to talk about our shared values, what we want, what do we want it to look like? I mean, do we want, I get it. I don't want my freedoms impinged unnecessarily, and I don't want to live in a lockdown world, but I also don't want to die of a disease that I could stop if I took some precautions, for a couple months, as painful as that might be. So I don't know. I mean, yeah, I don't want to say it's not a place for rational discussion. It's like irrational vision space, which I think maybe an imaginary space in the sense of shared imagination and public imagination. I think that might be more productive than some of our some of the methods that we have available to us to talk about these big issues.
You said an important thing, common ground, and that's something that's been missing in a lot of the political and cultural discussions lately. Is no one really seems to want to find common ground. They want to defend their own personal little space, and everyone else is wrong and they're right. And you can't get a consensus built on something like that.
Yeah. I mean, if to me, Austin could be the place where some sides that have never really had good relations could start talking to each other. I mean, we've got the weirdest weird left-wing anarchist, and we have Alex Jones down the street too. I mean, this could be the cauldron or melting pot place where something new, some kind of new way of talking or new way of.
But you're not suggesting that we find common ground with Alex Jones.
I don't think there's any common ground with Alex
Jones. That doesn't exist on this planet. I think that's up in some alien world.
But the people that follow Alex Jones, there's something there. I don't think everybody wants to eat their neighbors. Yeah.
There's no there in Alex world.
No, but I mean, they're like I started this whole conversation with death cult, and there is no common ground with a death cult if that's their endpoint, right? I mean, that's so people without a future or people whose future ends a certain way, maybe that's not part of the conversation. But if you have an open mind to different possible futures, then I think there's a seat at the table.
But who would have thought Austin would produce someone that would make Rush Limbaugh seem sane? Think about that for a second.
President Trump went on there. He went on there. He was interviewed twice by him during the election. I mean, what? Why is Donald Trump calling into the Alex Jones InfoWars show and telling him, you're going to be proud of me? I'm going to do things that make you proud of me.
Because he needed his shock troops, and he's got them now. So it's savvy in that sense. He needed muscle, needed crazy muscle, and when you're ready,
he's definitely
and now go liberate these government state houses. And when the election, mail-in votes are invalid, so we got to take back the electoral college. So get ready for that too. So they needed the muscle, the true believer muscles, and I think that's why.
I believe that's right too. Yeah. Do you think there's a war, a full-on war coming?
Possibly.
I do too. No, I certainly do actually, and I don't think I'm being paranoid. We can see it.
No, I don't. This is even with COVID. I mean, everything is lining up for any scenario on the table.
Yep.
Including invalidating the election, including states not being able to have elections, and then the electoral college voting and unfaithful electoral officials.
Yeah, that's going to be fun.
So then what are we going to do about it? That's the next question. What are we prepared to do if the will of the people is thwarted?
Is there no way for us to safely and securely vote online in our future in Austin? Never? Are we just not?
Not this cycle. I mean, maybe. There's good options for mail-in ballots and things like that, which I would trust the paper trail. I think our digital systems are too vulnerable to try to rely on that.
Any system that they come up with, there's going to be 15 hackers out there trying to break in. So it's much harder to break into a paper ballot.
But they do it. I mean, they do. I think Estonia,
and they lose them.
Yeah. So countries do it. It just, with the stakes so high, I don't know if you could secure our systems and trust it. Even if they were secure, would people trust it? And just say, "Oh no, they were hacked."
And that's certainly, I think that's certainly a big, huge part of it is they've totally made us question our integrity of our voting. So a lot of people are saying, why do it?
Yeah. The whole thing of question everything has kind of come back to bite us, because people question even things that are just patently true. I mean, you can't deny it. And no, that's not right because I think so.
Right.
Yeah, I used to, like, in the old Robert Anton Wilson kind of thread tradition, like, consensus reality. We don't. What are they trying to shove down our throats and all this? We need alternatives. And man, give me some of that old time consensus reality these days.
I know, we didn't know what we were setting ourselves up for, were we? Did we?
Reality, what a concept.
I mean, we did a lot of that stuff with Fringeware too. It's like, a bunch of us had bumper stickers on our cars that said question authority. And now it's like everybody's questioning every authority and there's no authority,
No, authority's questioning us.
Well, now that may have happened at your house.
Do we want to go back?
I
mean, are we going to be the conservatives that say, we need the sort of old time objective science enlightenment? Do we go back, or is there somewhere forward that's still allows you to question given quote unquote truths, but not so much that it just opened the door for charismatic authoritarianism or something like that? I mean, the earth is not flat, no matter what, but doesn't keep thousands of people from, proffering
believing
that.
It. Mm-hmm.
I mean, the idea of questioning authority and being open to debate is one thing, but being like completely dismissive of any authoritative source and saying, well, those guys are just members of the elite. They, as though if you're a member of the elite, you couldn't have the right answer,
Right.
Fauci is a member of the elite, therefore we don't want to listen to him anymore.
There's something about intention or like a moral compass, like Trump wanting to take down the CIA and FBI is only so he can get away with more crimes. But there's a legitimate reason that you would want to defang or at least have some oversight over those institutions for good. So I think in questioning authority, questioning expertise for good reasons. So maybe we go back to trying to suss out people's intentions. What are you trying to do? Like if you're of goodwill and you're actually critiquing our systems and trying to do that, or critiquing, a scientific given truth, then we see that. Although then people would argue about what your intentions really are and all that. But, I don't know. I'm just trying to find like, where's the where's the foundation of this that we stand on to build something that we can accept?
I just think for so long we took good intentions for granted. We sort of assumed good intentions in government and business and whatever. And that's been eroded over years, but especially with the election of Trump, it's like, all bets are off about good intentions. There are no good intentions. And we're watching, it's kind of an amazing thing. It's amazing to watch something where it's so clearly wrong, and yet it has support. Yeah. And you find yourself debating people who are making completely absurd contentions, and it's like, why am I even having to debate this point?
Exactly. You can show them the video of him saying something, or his very own tweet, or a picture from the past, and they will deny it. They say it's not true.
No, I didn't say that. Yeah,
no.
Well, my favorite futurist, Frank Zappa, summed it up when he's saying it can't happen here. And sure it can. It did.
That was a C.S. Lewis novel also, I think, wasn't it? I think it was.
It's a Donald Trump reality now.
Yeah, it is.
Well, the funny thing about good intentions, right? The Constitution, all of that is built on the assumption that people are going to be power hungry. And so the whole system was built to try to separate, diminish anyone from being able to take over too much of the government. So good intentions were sort of engineered out of it, or assumed not to exist, or the opposite. So I think getting back into that design mode. Okay, how do we design a system for the real reality that we see? What are people going to do? They're going to believe ideologically rather than rationally. Okay, well, instead of just gnashing our teeth about it, how do we design a system that can still create the kind of outcomes we want?
Even if people make bad decisions.
Yeah, or how do you marginalize the bad decision makers and reward the good decision makers, where good decisions that pay off in the long term are rewarded, rather than exploiting the long term for short term gains and lying and getting away with it and all that. So just going back to that idea of invention and design, I think helps me try to gain some clarity over, how are you ever going to convince a cultist that their beliefs aren't true?
How much of this situation do you think can be laid at the feet of the expansion of our ability to communicate? Anyone can say anything and be heard worldwide. And we're all old enough to remember when that was way more difficult. When I started out as a radio reporter, I only had one way of getting my story onto the news, was I had to pick up a telephone and call a guy at an office, and they would put it on a tape recorder, and it might get on the air. But now anyone has that access. We have the tools to create media, and whether it's good, bad, indifferent, it can get a wide audience.
Yeah. I think it does.
I don't know. The crazy lies and stuff have been going around for millennia. And maybe we blame the printing press for being able to spread ideas, right? The Reformation and Voltaire and all this stuff can come out of it as well. Is destabilizing, right? So I think that's one of the things that we have to live with. Is these new media always destabilize. Hitler with the radio in Germany, the dawn of TV, and the internet now. So I think they're all destabilizing. I think we're still trying to find our way forward to get what we want out of this medium, and try to play down some of the things we don't like. But yeah, it creates disturbances in the force, that's for sure. And I think we haven't really dealt with this wave very well.
I think if people were given an education in logic and learning how to determine the good facts from the lies, that might help a lot, but that's something I don't see being done a lot. I
That
see a
takes
lot of
work.
people who just believe that whatever somebody important says is got to be the truth.
It takes work to research.
Mhm.
If it's not in a soundbite or a clickbait, then people, that's too much. That's my favorite thing to do, is go down the rabbit holes.
I don't think, I wish I had more faith in education. I mean, I think it helps for sure, but no, I don't, people, I think the evidence is pretty clear. People can't just be swayed by information and facts. And I do agree. I think people are, we take shortcuts and we're intellectually lazy. So we like symbols. We like easy, sort of, okay, that means that. And Trump is good and he's for America and there's a flag next to him. And I'm going to ignore everything else. So I think these kind of mental shortcuts, whether it's laziness or just the way our brains work, I think, kind of precludes us from those deeper thoughts, or most of us anyway. And we're stressed out, and I need to get to the next thing, right? I don't have time to think through this and consider all the angles. I've got my answer, I've got my shortcut, I'm going with it and moving on to the next thing.
People have been become accustomed to getting their information in sound bites, little nuggets of not necessarily the truth, but it sounds good and it's short, and they don't have to spend a lot of time thinking about it. That's
completely out of
over
context.
the airwaves constantly.
Well, that's one thing, but the other thing is that it's 24/7, right? I mean, most of us, we remember when we were growing up, people were not exposed to media all day, every day. They were not like constantly barraged. They didn't watch television all day. They didn't have like an ongoing news feed, especially one that was tailored to their particular echo chamber. So what we have now is, I think we have a kind of derangement that's happening. I mean, a kind of craziness that's starting to emerge from the fire hose of information that everybody is exposed to all day, every day. And of course, you can drop a lot of viral bullshit into that ecosystem. And propaganda is, I mean, it's like a beautiful, almost perfect platform for circulating propaganda, manipulating the thinking of a sufficient number of people that you can start to build a following or a force behind your particular, let's say, brand, because I really think it is kind of like that. So you've got like Donald Trump, and I don't think he even thinks about what he's doing, but he is kind of a master of media. And, he's a game show host, basically, a successful game show host who figured out how to make an impact with social media as well as traditional media. And he's just got into people's heads, and way into people's heads. And then you have other people who are sort of in his orbit that are doing similar things. QAnon is fascinating. I've been reading a bit about QAnon lately. I mean, the extent to which a crazy bunch of conspiracy theories have become a sort of like almost religion for a bunch of people is just nuts,
If you say it loud enough and convincing enough, it's true.
I know, and I don't really know.
Or people could get on the
problem.
internet and babble, and it's no, wait, that's us. Never mind.
So what's the relationship? I'm I'm still trying to figure the exact relationship out between QAnon and all the other Qs and what's their name?
There's one Q.
There's only one Q, because I've seen, maybe it's the alternative stuff.
I mean, there's supposedly one Q. There is supposedly a single entity called Q. Could be a man or a woman or whatever. Could be an AI. And Q drops messages that are kind of cryptic,
I follow him on Twitter.
And-
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, people have started reading all kinds of things into into things that they're seeing in the media. What was it the other day? They were talking about how Donald Trump was wearing a yellow tie, and that was to signal to his
Oh yeah.
secret followers that, you know, that the coronavirus was, that the pandemic was a hoax.
Okay, and so are they connected to 4chan in any way? Is that
Well,
something?
4chan was a platform where I think that first emerged. There's a 4chan and there's 8chan, and there's a lot of weird stuff. You know, there's a lot of people who have gone on to those platforms to play a game of conspiracy theory, you might say. I don't know how seriously they take it, but
Right.
there's a lot of shit in the air, you know.
Well,
it's crazy.
anytime I hear about Q, I'm of an age where all I can think about is the silly looking guy on Star Trek.
Star Trek, right?
Well, that experience. So they possibly could have chosen a different image there. But I'm just seeing the crazy Star Trek guy.
Like
Well,
the flag, the new flag, the Space Force flag. It's the Star Trek symbol.
Yeah,
So
they
Jake,
stole
and
a
I
bunch of
should-
stuff for that.
I should give a 7-minute warning here. We've got 7 minutes left. But Jake, I mean, you're doing a lot of futurist work. Have you guys done any work with this kind of like media conspiracy stuff that has emerged as such a...
It's interesting you say that. I mean, we've done at the Institute quite a bit on disinformation, quite a bit on viral media. Doug Rushkoff, David Peskos, myself wrote a short paper a couple of years ago.
I read that.
And it kind of goes to a point we were making earlier about, you know, what's our cultural immune system to this kind of nonsense. And instead of trying to fight it with technology to suss it out with AIs and all this, you know, can we create a sort of cognitive inoculation to the viral kind of stuff that we're talking about, the intentional disinformation, misinformation, conspiracies, all that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a rich space. You know, I mean, conspiracies are really interesting because I think they appeal to those who want a deeper story. Like that, what I'm seeing on the surface is not what's happening. I know there's something else happening there. And so if you're a social scientist, you want to dig into the, you know, what are the environmental and social and historical and cultural precedents and genealogies that mix all this together. You know, I think there's a different strand of that, which is conspiracies. Like there's something going on that I'm not seeing, but there's order to the system. Maybe that's a better way of saying it. There's order to the system. And we're not getting the information about what the true order is of the system. So I think there's something that's not negative in what appeals to people about conspiracies. It's seeking deeper meaning. It's just weaponized by people that want to manipulate, consolidate power, distort reality for whatever reasons they have to do that. But I think it's a rich space, and in all of our trust mechanisms and mythologies and social institutions and things we've built, you know, sort of collapsing around us. What kind of new stories are we going to be building? And conspiracies fill that vacuum for now. And I think we need to get a better set of myths and stories and futures that we want together, just to kind of bring some of those early themes back. I mean, that's what I hope to see, is that there are better stories than you know, politically driven conspiracy theories and calling the fact that 80,000 people are dying a hoax. You know, there's a better way forward that I think would touch on some of those needs that I think are being expressed through QAnon and those kind of outlets.
Yeah, there's an inherent human tendency to look for patterns and to look for meaning. And kind of the way I see what's happening now is sort of like an autoimmune thing, you know, where the immune system sort of attacks you instead of the disease.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we sort of have that, like with viral information, that the immune system's out of whack, that people are starting to create patterns and meanings that just are, I mean, they're disconnected from reality, but they feel so real to them.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Yeah.
I want to start a conspiracy. I mean, everyone has one. I'm convinced that Donald Trump was actually cloned from the frozen corpse of that late great anti-Semite Walt Disney underneath Magic Mountain.
Ooh.
Hey,
Now
Alex
be
Jones.
careful what you say about Walt Disney around me, buddy.
Alex Jones is on the line right now, so
Yeah.
I may have a bite. Let me reel that in.
You've got another job. You're going to be at InfoWars in no time.
Oh, God forbid.
You know, we could take that
I'll
path.
have my
we
brain
really
scooped
could.
out first.
We could totally take that path. We could do a Stephen Colbert turnaround, right?
I mean, yeah, why not flood the system if we're going to flood it with nonsense conspiracies, you know?
At least make it funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's enjoy it. So here we go. Out of this, we'll start weirding on.
Yeah.
And that'll be
Okay.
Well,
I like it.
the masters of that sort of thing were my favorite guys, the Fireside and Theater. I grew up on their madness, and they created so many wild conspiracies. You know, everything you know is wrong is a masterpiece of conspiracy.
Yeah.
If you ever get a chance to listen to that online, the album "Everything You Know Is Wrong" will sound very current, actually.
Wow.
How can you be in two places at once when you're not anywhere at all?
That's too. My head just exploded.
Oh,
All right.
boy.
Well, we're down to the last 2 minutes. Jake, you got any closing words? Or do you want to sing a song?
But, yeah,
Ooh.
buckle up. But this year is going to be pretty rough. But I think we're going to need the future, both psychologically and culturally, to get us through this. And so thinking beyond 2020, thinking about 2030 maybe will help us be more clear-eyed about what's happening and where we want to go. Even though we have to act in the present, and we'll be out there wherever we have to be to make a better world and fight against the dark forces that are working right now. But so I think the future is a real powerful technology and tool that we should deploy aggressively and creatively, and I'd love to do that here. I think the future should come out of Austin, if anywhere. I'll take my chances with a future vision, and Austin leading the way on that front.
It would be great for a Austin Renaissance. It really would be, just to take all of this weird stuff that's not weird in a good way that's happened to this town and make it into something good. I really like the idea of it.
Yeah. This shouldn't be our last conversation about it. We should come back to it.
I think we've got a little
Yeah.
energy left, so it's kind of now or never, because another few years of being beaten down, I don't know if we'll have it in us. So I'd like to get on it.
Well, in the words of Buckaroo Banzai, no matter where you're going, there you are.
Right on. Well, thank you, Jake.
Thanks,
Jake.
y'all. That was fun.
Appreciate it.
Keep it
Talk
weird.
to you again soon.
All right. Aloha.
Aloha.
And that winds us up for another Plutopia Live.